All right. How's everybody doing? Good. All right. Sweet. Welcome to, this is our Chalk Talk. There we go. Chalk Talk, Tableau Server Automation APIs. This is a new type of talk we're doing this year. Instead of a breakout session where we talk at you for 45 minutes and then don't have enough time to answer questions, we're doing these talks. We're going to try them out where it's supposed to be much more interactive. So we've got some material to give you, about 10 minutes worth of slides, if that much. And then we want to get your feedback, either on your experiences using REST APIs so far, what you thought of Devs on Stage and our announcements today and over the week, or some upcoming things that we're thinking about, exploring, not official product announcements or anything we're necessarily working on, but ideas where we may take our automation APIs. Sound good? All right. And then I promise we'll get out of here in time to hit the buses and go party at the Superdome later.
You should tell them who you are before moving on to the next slide.
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
All right. So I'm Irwin Dolobowsky. I'm a staff product manager at Tableau. I've been there about 6.5 years. And I'm the product manager for our automation APIs, which includes our REST APIs, Webhooks, which you saw this morning, our document API, TabCmd, a few things like that. So with me is Russell.
And I'm Russell Hay. I'm the development manager for that same team. So I manage a small group of people who are responsible for delivering APIs to all of you wonderful people.
Yeah. How many people over here have actually used the REST APIs, built solutions with them? Cool. Okay. Everybody else just interested in learning more about them, seeing where we're going? All right, cool. Well, if you haven't used them before, again, give us feedback on where you think we're going. We'll kind of briefly go through where we're at. Most of this is forward-looking. We're also happy to chat with you about what's currently available, either after the session or come visit our kiosk. Our entire development team is down there, happy to answer questions, give demos, and talk about what you can build with all of our APIs, including these. And this kind of gives you a brief overview of our entire development stack. If you've attended any of our other development talks this week, you've probably seen this slide. And it just talks about, hey, how do we see our stack of development APIs and development tools? Embedded analytics, if you want to take a viz and put it into a custom portal. Extensions, which we showed off today about taking custom functionality, putting it into your vizzes. Data connectivity, like web data connectors, where you can actually build custom connections to new data sources. Data science, so being able to call out to R, Python, and calculations to do things that you can't natively do in Tableau. And then we're at the last one on the list. I hate to say we're at the bottom of the stack. We're the automation APIs. So we're the APIs you use when you want to integrate Tableau into a workflow, automate tasks on your server, things like that. So that's really what the REST APIs, the document APIs, TabCmd cover, where you have some process you want to automate, typically around content management. So that's where we're at today. So as we said, the plan, we'll do a brief overview of where we're at today and what's available, and then talk about where we think we're going, or where we might want to go, where we think we want to go, and then where you want to see us go. Where either you're having problems today, or hey, we're thinking about this technology for the future, or expanding out this way. We'd love to see some APIs in this area. So, sound good? All right. So where we're at today. Again, we kind of cover 4 areas on the automation team. Those 4 areas are our REST APIs. So that's primarily for content management, so publishing and managing workbooks and data sources, managing users and groups, schedules and tasks, all those functions of your server. Along with the REST API, we also have our Tableau Server client for Python. So this is a client library pre-built for you that works against those APIs. So if you're building applications in Python or scripting in Python to automate your server, you can use the client library to do that if you don't want to make the REST calls yourself. That's available up on GitHub. You can provide feedback up there, download it, check it out. You can see the source code, so if there's things it doesn't do and you want to add it or change it, it's all available for you. And then TabCmd, our traditional Tableau command line client. So if you've administered a server or used a server before, TabCmd is a command line client where you can create users, create workbook, or publish workbooks, manage things through a command line interface. It does not use the REST APIs. It uses a different set of APIs. In the future, we see it using the REST APIs, and we're trying to move in that direction. But it's available for you as well. We have a lot of customers, particularly from before we had the REST APIs, who use it to automate tasks, writing Windows batch files or things against TabCmd. Hopefully, if you have been doing that, you can move over to the REST APIs and start using those. And again, that's where we see in our future it'll also work against the REST APIs. And finally, our document API. We actually make an API available for parsing workbook information, editing some of that information, finding out some more of the metadata characteristics of workbooks. What connections does it have, what the title is, things like that. It doesn't get down into like the super granular level of being able to like manipulate rows and columns and things. Still have to do that visually. But if you're just trying to catalog workbooks, get some information about them, commonly used for, hey, I want to download a workbook from this server, publish it to this one, and change a data source, you can use the data source API to do that. Cool. Any questions so far? Yeah. Or Linux now, of course, on Linux as well if you're writing scripts on Linux. But yeah, so I know a lot of people do TabCmd. TabCmd automation is particularly if you're not familiar with writing calling REST calls. TabCmd is an easy way to get going. And then, of course, this morning we announced our new Webhooks project, so bringing callbacks to the web. So we'll chat more about that today. We'd love to hear your feedback on what you saw this morning. But really our goal here is to allow you to build more interactive integrations with Tableau. We know many people they're waiting for events to happen on Tableau, or they're checking on the progress of things. Has my refresh finished? Has my workbook published? When this finishes, do this. And today you have to keep polling your server, keep checking status, and just wait for that to happen. With webhooks, that information will flow to you, so you can react to things as they happen without sitting there, polling, waiting, okay, now I can finally do something. We'll tell you when something important happens, and then you can react to it. So. All right. So like I said, this was going to be a real quick presentation. We'll get to kind of where we think we're going. So all of this is kind of either things we're currently working on or things we've said, hey, maybe we should go investigate this in the future. So there's no specific planned release vehicle. Some of this may never be released. Again, it's ideas, and we want to see what your feedback is, which things really speak to you, get some Q&A about these, and use them to kind of inform our product roadmap. So the first thing is REST API. We'll continue to support the REST API going forward. We're going to continue to enhance it. We'd love to hear your feedback in a couple minutes about if you have used it, where you've hit problems or where the shortcomings are with it. If you haven't used it, what your concerns may be. Internally at Tableau, we're actually kind of rewriting it, the infrastructure for the REST API, with the goal of making it much more robust and much more complete. One of the biggest pieces of feedback we hear about it, or the most often, is, hey, I can do this if I publish from desktop, but I can't do it from the REST API. Why not? Or I can do this in the Visportal UI, but I can't do that from the REST API. Why not? Right? And we look and say, oh, because the person who built the web portal was 3 years ago. They don't use the REST API. The person who built the REST API didn't include that option. We'll add it for you. So what we're doing is kind of going back, rebuilding the infrastructure, but then going back and really systematically rebuilding all of the APIs to be much more complete. So anything you can do through the web, you can do through our REST APIs. If you can do it when publishing through desktop or TabCmd, you can do it through the REST APIs. Our ultimate goal is that all of our clients use the same public REST APIs that we give you. So there's no longer a disconnect between what we can do and what you can do for content management features and things like that. Viz interaction is left out of that, but anything you can really do with Viz portal, so publishing workbooks, managing users, managing groups, setting up sites, things like that. We want to align our APIs. Internally, we call it one API, which is kind of a terrible name and confuses people.
Sorry.
But really, it's about aligning and saying, hey, if there's a function that Viz portal provides, our content management system provides, let's make sure there's one API that does that, and let's give you all the same API that we use. So if we're building a function or we're building something and you need to build it differently, customize it, you want to build it into a custom portal that you're building, you can do that and you're sure you're getting the exact same functionality that we have. So we've kicked off that effort. It's going to be a long effort because we've got a lot to rebuild and over time. But you'll probably start seeing that sometime next year, some new APIs coming out that we'll ask our developer program members to start testing for us and see what they think. So we're really excited about that. That'll also give us the ability to add much more breadth of APIs a lot quicker. So as we spin up new things like data-driven alerts, metrics, all these other teams are producing new products, we're going to be working with them to make sure that APIs and API access is included at launch and not something that's dragging along or tailing along. So, REST APIs. Webhooks, again, we talked about this morning. What we have now available is a developer preview. If you join our developer program, you'll get access to an online site where webhooks are working. And again, this is, hey, an event happens in Tableau server. When it does, please call this URL with a small payload so I can take action on it. And we're looking at, over time, instrumenting as many events as possible. Right now, I think we started with extract refreshes, workbook publishing, data source publishing.
Yeah, there's like 6 of them.
Yeah,
6 or 7.
There's a small number. We figured they would be the most popular ones around, hey, something got published or information about refresh tasks. But our goal is over time, anything that happens on server could potentially be a webhook. So new users get created, permissions change. Again, that way, if you're monitoring your server for changes, listening for what happens, you'll know immediately when something happens. That, of course, includes a lot of administration functions, so you can control who can create them, who can manage them, things like that. So, and we'll be looking for feedback about that. Again, this is in preview now. We'll be working on that next year as well. Authentication and authorization improvements. For those of you who use the REST API, have you run into any issues around authenticating to them? Yes. All right. Anybody else? Just one person? All right, so we got a couple. So today, for those of you who aren't aware, our REST APIs require you to log in with a username and password today, which is, of course, all the way that all big enterprises do everything, right? Just username and password, no two-factor auth, no advanced auth, yeah. So we recognize this is a limit for people, that we require username and password today. Many organizations have gone beyond that for great reasons. Tableau has as well. And so this limits your ability to use the REST APIs. So right now we're looking at rebuilding our authentication to support a number of different types, but also to give you access to more ways, more types of authentication through the REST APIs, and also bring token-based authentication to the REST APIs. So you'll be able to go in, generate tokens on your server, and instead of passing a username and password, just give us a token. We'll authenticate you that way. We've got a bunch of ideas in that area, a bunch of different ways we could go. Again, we want to hear kind of how you're thinking about it or what things you've hit. But we know that's a big blocker for a lot of people, and we want to start to remove that this year. And then the document data source APIs. So I mentioned that before. We've got a document API now. It is somewhat limited. We've got requests all the time for, hey, I need this information or that information. It also only works on clients. So if you want to look at a workbook on your server, you have to download it, and then you can use the document API to use it. We know many people don't want to take the time to download a workbook. They're big, or I just want to get something quick around it. So should we be doing something on the server where you can get more information about specific workbooks or data sources directly from the server without downloading it? We're kind of kicking around some ideas, and again, we'd love to hear your feedback. And so those are the big areas. We're also looking at a couple of just more technology-focused things. Is anybody interested in GraphQL? Cool. Wow, 4 people. Awesome. Awesome. We'd love to hear about it. So GraphQL, new kind of method of doing APIs on the web. I think Netflix, Facebook, a few others have really embraced it. It allows you to compose calls together, customize your response right from the client. If you haven't seen it, it's cool tech. A lot of companies are moving that way in the APIs they expose. We've gotten a few requests for it, and we're trying to figure out, hey, is this something we should be going to look at? When, how, things like that. So if you're interested in it, we'd love to hear. More client libraries. We have Python now. We definitely want to hear what other languages we should be making available. We will be making, and we have today, and we'll be making in the future Swagger files available, so for generating your own clients. But what clients should we be providing you? Python's been great, but we know there's Java users, Go users. If you're JavaScript, if you like Russell, Rust. Are there any Rust users? PowerShell. See, PowerShell. Cool. Ruby. All right. Cool. So yeah, so those are all possible. So we don't know which things should we support there. Open source TabCmd, as I mentioned, we are looking at moving TabCmd to use our public REST APIs. At that point, we'd love to make it open source, because at that point it's just using public APIs, and it's just a command line client for public APIs. So we'd love to make the client available to you if you want to take it, customize it, or just see how we work with the APIs. And then potentially in the future, even open sourcing the entire Viz Portal client UI. We know many of you are building custom portals yourselves, or, hey, I see your portal, but I want to be able to put this in there. Again, it uses a bunch of proprietary, non-documented APIs that were built for the purpose of that client. Our goal in the future, we'd like to take it to use the public REST APIs and then make it available for customization. At that point, it's just really a JavaScript client for the REST API, so why not? So this is where I put my slide to say to the board, because this is a chalk talk, and we have no chalk, no boards.
So what we do have is a microphone that I will be passing around, and Irwin and I will be taking notes locally as necessary.
Yeah. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to leave this slide up here. I'd love to start with just current REST API users. Get an idea of what are the big, like, have you hit some big problems? Is there some functionality that's missing? Things like that. So
we're using the REST API to add users.
Add users, yep.
Yeah,
Is that on?
Site and groups. And one of the things is that we add user one at a time.
Yep.
So is there a way to bulk upload all the users so we don't have to make a lot of REST calls?
Sorry, keep talking, keep talking.
So bulk user addition to Tableau server. Cool. Not today. We actually I just heard a couple of other requests for this. So if you're not familiar, if you want to add users to Tableau server via the REST APIs, it's one at a time. If you have 20,000 users to add, that takes a while. So you're saying bulk user addition, bulk actions in general. Cool. Are other folks hitting that? Got at least a couple more hands up. Cool, yeah. A lot of the REST APIs were built for one-off, like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. They originally weren't really built for large bulk actions. And so it's great. OK, so several folks are kind of hitting that, hey, I need to do larger and larger requests. I don't want to make lots of them. I want to do one at a time.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we've been investigating and thinking about. We just haven't come up with a solution for it yet. We actually have, he has his hand up next.
Cool. So the other folks who said they were having the problem, is it also with users or is it with something else? Users? Let me get right back to you. Let me finish this and let me get back to you after he goes. And I'll take you next, OK? Cool.
Question on passwords going through the REST APIs.
Yep.
There's a fight between a triad of apps that you could sell tickets to. And it has to do with Tableau server, your Windows environment that your desktop and the Alteryx designer run on. The Windows environment, we're now required in a healthcare environment. We use special characters heavily. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to better standardize what you should be using for special characters rather than leaving it to the user to figure out? There's some real creative people out there.
Sure.
And what you'll get is Windows will take it. Take it, everything's happy, Outlook works, whatever the instant message app of choice is, we'll take it. And then you get into this fist fight between the stuff that's exchanged through Alteryx and Tableau.
Cool. Yeah, so Alteryx may not take it, or Tableau may not take the specific special characters. Yes, I'm going to point at Eric. Everybody wave to Eric. He's in the orange shirt. Huh? Thanks. Russell was going to do it too. So Eric is our authentication PM. So he loves to hear about these kinds of problems. We are working on some new things. Sorry. Wow. Password complexity, being able to control what characters can go in there, password expiration, things like that. So if you want to chat with Eric about the specific use case afterwards, he would love to hear about that. That's awesome. Thank you. What was your question? So
yeah.
You're using the REST APIs?
So, no, I've never used a REST API before, but I was just wondering if you can also do a bulk for subscriptions, just get a bunch of users, add them to subscriptions, because I know in the web portal you have to do them one at a time.
You should be able to.
In Tableau server.
Yeah, you should. I'm pretty sure you should be able to. Let me follow up with you afterwards. I want to double check just to make sure I don't give the answer, the wrong answer. But we do have the ability to subscribe to them through the APIs. So. Cool.
Okay.
Are there other areas where the REST API either doesn't have something that you can do through your server, Did you have one? Active Directory groups, so syncing them? Adding them to the server. Okay. Did you have one in the back?
Yeah, I'm on 10.5, so if you did this,
What's taking you so
let
long?
me know.
Tableau 10.5.
To be able to refresh a data source without attaching it to a schedule, because we love having thousands of schedules out there for every job that gets refreshed.
Awesome, I'm glad you like it.
18.1.
You want to answer that, Russell?
18.1, we added the ability to kick off a refresh directly from the REST API.
Yep.
About subscriptions.
Subscriptions,
I think so.
I think so,
We'll
yeah,
double check.
because I think the scheduling all handles is handled the same way. So.
Yeah, so if you've been using the REST APIs to, hey, come on guys, have a seat. So if you've been using the REST
We're gonna come
APIs
back around
to
to-
manage subscriptions, manage schedules, we've got a schedules team. I think they're hanging out in the IT governance kiosk downstairs. You can look for Tao is there, Arun is there. They're adding and really working on our scheduling system. So that's subscriptions, extracts. We just added some APIs for being able to cancel extract jobs in 2018.2 or 3, I don't remember. Sorry? Yeah. So we're adding some more and more APIs around job management because we know that's been a struggle and people want more control. So I think, in fact, the only way you can cancel a job right now is through the REST API. It'll be coming to TabCmd and coming to the Viz Portal UI, but we are adding more and more APIs for job scheduling and job management. Again, if you have more feedback, the IT governance folks hanging out in the booth there, they're the ones building those. We partner closely with them, and they'd love to hear that you're looking for that. But we are adding more and more job scheduling APIs, as we know that's been a challenge for folks, and you want to control it more. So.
I'm actually not doing the undocumented.
Nobody else in here is using the undocumented Viz Portal APIs, I'm sure. No customers ever do that. It's really hard to find. Yeah.
So piggybacking in the same question, and we are in 10.52, so I don't know if the new one have it, but are you able to then trigger the refresh through the API? Are you able to also get a response or what happened with that refresh?
You can check the status of a job. You can check the status of a job. We have a job, again, I think it was added after 10.5. We've got APIs for basically checking the status of the job. It'll tell you percentage completion, if it succeeded or failed, messages, things like that. So yeah, if it's probably just you haven't caught up with it yet. Again, sign up for our developer program. You'll get access to some of the latest stuff, and you can check them out there.
Yeah, so a little bit more details about that. So in 10.5, you could refresh the extract through the schedule. And when you do that, it gives you a job ID, and then you can use the jobs endpoint to get more information about that. In 10.5, it's basically you get a % complete and like the last update time. And so that's kind of, you have to do the correlation yourself. If it's 100% and it's relatively recent, then it completed recently. So that's kind of the workaround for that. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh,
Way over there.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think you're next.
I should just turn off my mic.
I haven't really looked into this yet. I'm just curious if it's possible. So we have a third-party consultancy that's building some Tableau workbooks for us, and they send us monthly a zip file containing a bunch of data, flat files, and then one Tableau workbook. It's a massive Tableau workbook, and then so I have a job that extracts everything, loads the data into our warehouse. But I have to manually open the Tableau workbook in my desktop and change the data source connection string to point at our warehouse, and then publish that to our server, Tableau server. Is that something I can do through the REST API?
The document API is what you want to look at there.
Document API?
Yeah, before you publish it, if you want to change the connection settings, the document API lets you do that.
Awesome.
Cool. Are other folks using the document API today? Sorry, did you have a? Okay. Cool. Which other one? Okay. Oh, Brian's document. His stuff. Yeah. Okay. So, is anybody else using Brian's API? Do you know what that is?
Tableau tools.
Tableau tools.
Anyone?
All right. Cool. Yeah, we work closely with Brian and his team. I know he's built a lot of great additions to that, simplifying some of the workflows. So Tableau Tools is built by one of our pre-sales folks. His name is Bryant. He's awesome if you haven't met him. He's very excited. But they built a bunch of, I'd say, higher level tools. So our goal is to give you the building blocks to go build things. Tableau Tools is a collection that they built around, hey, you know, we took those building blocks and we added the next level on top of it. So they're building kind of flows or sets of things and basically making our stuff easier to use. And so we work with them. We're going to continue to work with them. A lot of the features we bring come in through their team. So if you have an account manager and you're trying to use the APIs and having problems, they're a great way. Like, send them feedback. It all comes to us. And we try in every quarter or every release, add a few more things to the REST APIs while we're working on these new big projects. We're just adding view permission management and a couple other things that were direct feedback from our pre-sales team, from our account managers, to remove sales blockers. So cool. Tableau Tools and whatnot. So yeah. So do you have another question or another piece of feedback? Great. What was yours?
Is there any plans on?
Use the microphone.
Is there any plans on implementing like content distribution APIs? As nice as Tableau Tools is and stuff like that, we have roughly 300 different sites on our server. And so when we have sort of like a template workbook, publishing it to all 300 of the sites, even with like the new asynchronous publish methods, it's time consuming, especially with the size of some of these things. We're talking 16 hours some days.
Okay.
It would be incredibly nice to be able to say, you know, copy this workbook from this site with all of its data sources that are needed to X other sites.
Now, when you're copying it between sites, would you be changing anything about it, the data sources, filters, or is it just literally?
The filters, we usually, the way we run our filters, before we publish it, we have it set to like all. Like, we design the filters and stuff like that, but we have them set to all, so no matter what those filters get either dynamically set to or whatever, it will be available, and they'll all be pre-checked. But yes, data sources would change during that, which, I mean, obviously, yeah, we'd have to specify, but I mean, that's easily done via like a collection of objects.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Oh, just curious. I've heard both. Were you looking for the same?
Yes,
Okay.
same thing, but
Pass him the
don't
mic.
change the data sources.
You don't change the data sources?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I've heard that a couple times, but it's great. Like, we've heard people ask for, let me copy workbooks. Some do want to change data sources, some don't. For some of our customers, it's, hey, I just literally need to copy the same workbook between lots of sites. Right now, I need to download it and re-upload it and download it and re-upload it. Other folks, you know, again, it's per site. I need to customize it. So that gets into what we're talking about, the data source and document APIs. Bringing that up to the server so you can do your editing and changing right on the server. Potentially even just saying, hey, like, copy this over to this site. Because it is a republish request right now, which we understand, like, particularly for a big workbook, download and upload can take a while, or even just, I'm uploading the same bits, I just need to tweak a little information in there. So cool. Is anybody else doing kind of bulk sites? You have to distribute data to different sites? Cool. Are you having similar issues where you need to deploy to the same thing to lots of sites, or are they fairly independent?
I realize you said sites.
Sites. Or multiple servers, you know?
Yeah, we have a dev, PS, and prod.
Okay.
And we publish from dev, PS, prod, and
Okay. You know, right now you have to download your test workbook or whatever, then publish it up to the next system, change it.
what we ended up doing was just not doing that and just having the person use Git to publish it. They have a local machine.
Okay.
Right.
So he was talking about having multiple environments. We see this frequently. You'll have a pre-production environment and a production environment. Everybody can party on pre-production, but when something gets approved, then only then can it move over to production. And again, today that involves, if you want to move it between servers, download the workbook, edit a bunch of data, republish it to a new workbook. And we've seen all of you come up with a lot of different solutions to doing that, using the REST APIs and using Git or some other repository. We can definitely look at like kind of making that smoother, of saying, hey, let me just copy it directly from this project to here, or certain tags.
Something like built right into Tableau, so you wouldn't have using scripts or anything.
It would. But again, so he was saying it would be great if it was built into Tableau. Again, like from our team's perspective, like, yes, we should go build that feature and then give you APIs. So you could choose, do you want to use the built-in feature, or do you want to customize it and automate it yourself, right? I think, in some cases, for example, I was talking about we added APIs for job management. We may actually start releasing APIs first, right? UIs are kind of hard to build. You got to get the experience right. But a lot of times, just getting an API up and start using it, that's a lot easier to do in a lot of cases. So you may see we're kind of doing that in a couple cases. We may do it more. But yeah, absolutely. We would, we're the API team, so we love APIs, but we recognize anything we're doing should be available through the UI, and again, we believe vice versa. So
That's a good segue into webhooks, since
Yeah.
we did exactly that for webhooks.
we did exactly that for Webhooks. Yeah. Did you have a comment? Yeah.
So we were doing something similar where we were shipping around data sources, which are usually extracts, so they were quite large. And we ended up using like the Tableau server client for that.
Okay.
But like the bottleneck we hit was maybe Python and memory, in terms of like it had to fit into memory to even be successfully downloaded. Is that a Python thing, or is there something else you could do in the Tableau server client to get around that?
You know this one?
That's a limitation of the current implementation. It is something that's on our mind to get it so that we can stream directly to disk rather than having to hold it in memory and then write it to disk.
Yeah.
It is definitely one of those pain points that we know about that we just haven't solved quite yet, just resourcing levels.
So did you all watch the devs on stage this morning? What did you think of the webhooks? Good, bad? Yeah? Cool. What was your initial reaction? Like, useful? Is there questions you have about them? Or anything in particular you said, oh, I really want webhooks for this area of Tableau server? Validating extensions?
So like,
We're going to give you the microphone.
sorry. Like our immediate use for webhooks is probably going to be, we really, really like the idea of extensions and we want to be liberal with what we allow.
Okay.
But at the same time, we also want to validate what our users are uploading. So we're probably going to be, like, it'd be really, really nice to have a webhook that was specifically, hey, a new extension has been added, or somebody uploaded a workbook with an extension in it.
Okay.
But I understand that we could, the same tool that I have that runs all of our like content distribution and all that actually runs off of a Python server. So I'm probably just going to have it post back to that Python server to grab the workbook, to go grab the workbook information, to parse out the extension information to see if it's in like a list that we already know about, and then say, yay, you can use that extension, or no, you got it from evilcompany.com and don't use that
Their
extension.
extensions are great, though. Do you use them? They're awesome. Yeah, so as we said, publishing workbooks is like the first webhook we built. But in that webhook, certainly including more information about the nature of the workbook, it sounds like would be useful. Whether extensions, I don't know, it uses an R server, it uses this particular feature. Cool, that's awesome.
So
Yeah.
how much internal information am I allowed to give about
I
extensions?
don't know, do you promise all not to hold us to it?
All the stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so for every extension that is uploaded to the server so that we know about it, there's actually a table in Postgres.
Yeah, so you can find out. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like it. There you go.
so it'll help you now.
That same Postgres server that I might have seen a blog post about that we can open up, that we can report on internals in Tableau.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the one that, I mean, we give you information about how to access it, how to set passwords and stuff, so, yeah. So
But the feedback about
it's
the
in there.
webhooks is still great.
Yeah, I took that, and
Yeah.
That's probably
That's-
going to be our immediate case.
and that's all our team, so we can easily get that in without having to talk to anybody else, which is good.
Yeah, but imagine others of you may want other information like, hey, it uses this data source or it uses this particular feature or things like that.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment, or let me get to you and then I'll get to you. And then if there's other folks, I'll get to you.
Have you already released the documentation for that Postgres database that they were talking about so that we can
Oh, yeah.
open up with the server?
Oh yeah, so he was asking about, we mentioned, if you haven't seen it before, as part of Tableau server, if you search for Google event history or workgroup database, you can get access to the Postgres repository and all the information in there. There's a read-only user you can choose to turn on, it's off by default, and then you can just connect to it as a normal Postgres database, make queries, things like that. Typically we see it for people creating their own custom administration views, but also doing for things like, what extensions have been used on my server, or doing custom workflows around looking for old workbooks, things like that. It's fully documented in our online help. Just look for, I think it's workgroup database schema or event history, and you'll find it in there.
Yeah.
There's a full data dictionary as well as instructions on how to turn on that read-only user.
Yeah. Though disclaimer, we do not guarantee that we won't change the schema
Yeah.
in the database. So
Yeah, the schema does change based on our
with
needs.
releases, you may have to do some work.
But it is there for your use.
This is just a pain point. We have lots of people publishing to our servers, and not all of them are developers, and there's some version control problems just all over the place. Is there any products you guys got that can help us? Because trying to convince a bunch of people who aren't that technical to commit stuff to Git is already confusing enough.
So we did add a very basic version history into Tableau
Yeah,
server.
I saw
so
that
we're
in the
using
server,
Okay.
that there is a revision history. How far back does it go?
So it's configurable through your as a server admin. So I think by default it is unlimited.
Is it unlimited?
20, I say,
Or
it's 25 versions.
25.
Yeah, but you can set it to unlimited, I think.
You can set it as, it's more of just a matter of space and
Yeah.
resources. You can make it bigger or smaller, but there is a configurable value. I think 25 is the,
Yeah.
Does it exist somewhere, like of just a bunch of files on the server that I can find?
It's in the Postgres database, so there's the metadata is all stored in Postgres, and the history of that is all in there,
And I
as
think-
well as I think the XML.
Yeah, I think we have an endpoint in the REST API that allows you to get revision information.
Yeah, we could dig in with you like at the kiosk or something. if you
Yeah,
wanna-
just come by
but-
the
we could do
kiosk,
that.
we can.
For everybody else in this room, how are you guys fixing your version control issues?
I heard somebody uses Git somebody over here had used Git, right? Yeah. Git and Jenkins. Yeah, some custom workflows. Sorry? TFS. Okay. Yeah, so again, we see a bunch of people implementing custom solutions, usually based on what versioning system you already have internally, right? So we could release something for Git, but if you're using TFS, it'd be less useful for you. So we'd love to, build, again, if there's APIs that we could add to make it work better with Git and TFS and whatnot, we'd love to do that. Generally speaking, we'd rather integrate with whatever repository you already have. So we're not telling you, hey, we worked really well with this one, except you don't use that one, and then it's kind of useless for you. So, yeah. And we can check out their version history and stuff if you want a little later and figure out the exact settings and whatnot. It was released a couple years ago, I think. So. Do you have one over there?
Yes.
All right.
But I'm not going to stand in front of the microphone again, or in front of the speaker again.
With webhooks, one of the things they showed this morning, or they kind of led into, was refresh and extract is complete, and you can send out notifications, but when you actually look at it, it goes, well, the refresh is complete, and now you can go post to your email server. Is there going to actually be a piece that allows you to say, just trigger off a subscription, or is it going to have to be, oh, this hook calls that server, and then that server will have to make a tab command or a REST API call back in to do something? So now here I've got a standalone server sitting there just to funnel requests right back to you.
Yep. Nope, totally get that. So right now, the latter. In the future, hopefully the former. We're talking to the schedules team, and they've got a lot of plans to really increase the productivity of subscriptions, of refreshes, of all those. And one of their top items is, hey, we know that a lot of people hit issues where, because of timing, my subscription gets sent out before my refresh is done, and now my data's old. So, yeah. Yep. They may look at actually just using the webhooks we're building, so which would be nice, because, hey, we should use our own stuff.
Yep.
We're painfully aware of that problem. So webhooks would enable you to build a solution for that right now, and they're working on adding that natively into the product potentially. So
Yeah,
I don't wanna put
my
words in
goal
their
is,
mouth, but
as the development
pretty good
manager for Webhooks, is to make every piece of Tableau server need us. It's great job security.
The other thing we're looking at is, we've got our data-driven alerts. We've got lots of different types of notifications in server. Our goal, and I'm literally just talking about this yesterday with a few folks, is how do we bring all these together, right? So something happens in server, I want to be notified, or I want something to happen based on that. And right now, around the edges, you can kind of see how these things were maybe built independently or whatnot. So one of our goals is going to be, over the next year, is really to combine those to say, like, hey, any event could potentially fire an email, fire a webhook, fire a mobile alert, whatever it is, or potentially kick something else off in Tableau server.
Yeah.
So right now, again, it's getting those building blocks in place. And so somebody could go build those, you potentially. but then starting to then knit those together more just right out of the box. Get the APIs going and then build stuff on top of them. That's how we like to operate, right? Let's start with the building blocks and the individual pieces, and then let's figure out which ones we want to just include in the product because this is a common workflow, this is a common problem, and which ones we want to leave to either our customers or partners to go build because it's more esoteric or not needed by as many people. So but that is definitely on our radar. We know it's a big pain point. We're looking at it. So thank you.
So we have a case for, we generate a lot of report because the security that we have in our data, they're using user filters. Is there anything to kind of warm up the report so when our client go there, they don't have to cache all that so that they can see the report right away?
Warming up the cache. I don't know.
Okay.
Not through the API. There used to be in TabCmd or TabAdmin a warm cache thing that didn't actually do what you wanted it to do, and our caching technologies changed for a while, so I think we got rid of it. If you're interested in talking about that, the IT governance guys, I think would be the best guys to talk to. They're really the architectural guys of the underlying services and whatnot. They might have some ideas, but a lot of it's going to depend on the nature of the workbook, the nature where, like, is it an extract, is it a live connection? There's a ton of different factors that go into that and speeding those up.
I mean, right now we are using the unofficial to log it with user for every client just to show the
Certainly
report.
running through and like pinging it and creating an image or something out of it would just kind of naturally put it into the cache. I don't recommend that. Subscriptions, any of those things would do it. Anything that gets the workbook to load would prime it. That is something, we don't have anything, I think, out of the box.
I was going to just recommend exporting it as a CSV through the REST API would at least warm up the query cache, which is the cache of the actual data from the SQL Server.
I see.
And there's lots of different caches there. So.
Yeah.
Which cache you wanna prime? So we got one up here. Sorry? Yeah, so one of our open source tools, well, you're walking over that way. He was mentioning TabJolt. It's one of our open source tools that you can use to hit and do performance. Again, it just loads the workbook and would prime things up. So, yeah.
My use case is the ETL job. Sometimes it takes extended period of time. What workflow do you see we could use using some of these tools to trigger the extract refreshes after the ETL job has completed successfully?
So the question about ETL workflows. So we have REST APIs, and we're adding more and more for job management. So something that when your ETL workflow is done, you call our REST API to run a refresh task. And then when that refresh task is done, you could potentially fire a webhook so you know, okay, ETL task is done, call Tableau server to kick off the refresh, listen for the webhook. When the refresh is done, the webhook would call back to your system, and you can take whatever appropriate action is after that, right? That's really what kind of the two ends of the system. REST APIs to kind of kick things off, webhooks to provide that feedback of when events happen or when jobs complete. And then you can create a nice feedback loop there with whatever system you have. So did you have a...
Was it a follow-up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Today the challenge also is that whatever REST API calls you try to make from within your SQL, from the ETL side, it requires you authentication and login.
Yes.
And how do you manage the that authentication without having the username and password saved on someplace as an open text file?
All right. So again, Eric's your guy. So again, I mentioned in the beginning, right, and that's one of our big red circle up there. I put it in red, so it's big and important. That's a problem with the REST APIs today. So you don't have an option but to use a username and password. So we do see people create specific users in your database or in your product in the Tableau server just for jobs. Now, of course, though, that uses a license if you're a per user license. So that's where we want to go in the future is, hey, how do I provide more forms of authentication through the REST APIs? So we're kind of looking at two different paths there. One is if you're building an interactive application with Tableau server where you want somebody to log in every time, being able to make our login flows available to you. So instead of capturing their username and password yourself, you could potentially direct them to a login form that we host. They log in, you get a session ID and pass it to us just like you do with the rest of the REST APIs. That would then cover SAML, AD, all the different types of auth we have. We're also looking at doing token-based authentication. So you would go into Tableau server, you would generate a token, at first probably associated with a specific user, but we're also looking at just general like, hey, I want to generate a token just for this particular job or for the server itself. And then when you call the REST APIs, you include that token, no username and password, and think like, if you've used Google Maps, you can generate a token from them and use it in other applications, something like that. So we get rid of username and password, we get rid of whatever the particular type of authentication is, and we just say, hey, just pass us this token. You can generate them in Tableau server, pass them when you call us, and that will authenticate for you to get rid of a lot of these hurdles we have with authentication. So.
Token generation, is that a one-time activity, or does that happen every time you get a login?
Again, this is something we're just kicking off, but we're thinking this is something you would create, and then it would live as long as you want it to live. So you'd go into Tableau server, say, hey, generate me a token for this user or this process. And then it would be valid until you go in and invalidate it, or potentially like, hey, we'd have some settings to say the maximum length the token can live is 6 months or something like that. Kind of what we're kicking around now is where do we want to go with that? What do we want to do first? What options would we want to have in it? So.
Yeah, and we're looking at other models, like how other people do it. So like AWS, IAM users, they have a application key or an API key, and then the client secret. We're considering a lot of those different styles. We just haven't decided on one yet.
Yeah.
My query was around, is it possible to partition extracts? For example, say, if I'm coming from a SQL Server background, so we partition tables, and it's possible for us to say, do things in parallel and finish a task in say 10 minutes. Whereas once that data comes into SQL Server table and moving that into say Hyper is at the moment about 3 or 4 hours.
So I'm going to say you're going to want to go talk to the data guys, the folks at the folks at the data kiosk. There's a bunch of people there. They're going to be much more knowledgeable about that than we are. We don't have APIs for doing that, but in terms of like data sharding, splitting things up, go chat with the folks in the data booth. I'm sure they'd love to hear about it and chat with you to understand your scenario. That'd be much more at their level than our level.
Okay.
So.
And I'm not sure if it might be something relevant. Like, is it possible to combine multiple data sources? Is there an API or something which can do that?
So we have a couple different APIs for manipulating data sources or creating your own extracts. So you're trying to like take tables from 2 different databases?
Yeah, for example, say we have got one data source that has got all the snapshot data, and say one data source that has got all current data. And at some point, maybe some workbooks need those 2 to be combined around those lines. So
you can do that within the desktop client itself with data blending and whatnot?
Yeah, but depending on the data volume, it is.
Yeah.
So if it's the same layout, like so it's literally like same type of columns in both of them, you can actually use the extract API that the Hyper team creates or has created and released. So you create the extract first with one set, and then you append the extract with the second set, and then publish the combined extract up. So that would be the way to do it, at least right now.
Yeah. You got a question? We have about 12 minutes left, so we'll try and answer as many questions and may ask a few more. Yeah?
So one of our biggest pain points right now is being able to interact with the backgrounder.
Okay.
So being able to shuffle stuff in the queue, tell things to not run right now, or make them inactive or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Our backgrounder just gets like fairly deep at certain points in the day. Is there any plans to be able to interact with it via an API? And
yeah, like I said, in our current release, or I forget if it's 2018-2 or 3, we released the ability to cancel jobs, manage jobs a little more, and we're going to be adding more and more APIs for that. So let me look at the queue, let me potentially reorder things. The team building those has a long list of task management, both for schedules as well as for refresh extract things.
Yeah. And they're definitely plugged into the developer program, so they're planning to show off and release stuff early through our developer program. And they last 2 months.
Yeah, they actually demoed stuff to the Before the official developer program, we had a preview program for extensions. They actually demoed some things during one of our public sprint reviews. So yeah, we're actively working on those things. Maybe afterwards, if there's specific APIs you want or specific things, I'd love to get a list. Or like I said, in the IT governance kiosk, some folks from that team are hanging out there. They'd love to hear what scenarios you're specifically hitting, because they're actively working on that right now.
And before we take another question, I do want to take a moment to point out Mary in the corner over here. She is our docs writer. So if you have any feedback on our documentation for any of our APIs, anything under the developer area, she would love to take your feedback after the talk. So feel free to find her and let her know what's working, what's not working, and anything around that.
Other, yeah, go ahead.
Just a request, maybe could you show some of the things that you've built, something you can brag about?
Something that I've built? I'm a PM, I don't write code. I'm the pretty face. Russell built all of Webhooks in like the last month and a half, so go join the developer program and try Webhooks, and you can check out something really
so
cool.
if you were at Devs on Stage, everything, well, all of the webhook stuff that Keisha showed off was stuff that I wrote myself in the last month and a half.
Yeah, so I just, brought him food and made sure he had enough coffee. So.
Yeah, as a developer, one of the most important skills is learning how to tell your PM no, that timeline is not realistic, and that is something that I absolutely need to work on.
I wasn't the PM in question. Just
No. It was his boss.
But we're really glad to bring it to you. It was an awesome demo, and hopefully at least...
It was absolutely worth the effort, though.
It sounds like some of you saw it and said, yeah, this is going to be really useful to us. So, cool. Any more feedback on kind of any of the big areas here, webhooks, authentication? Yeah. Let's bring you the mic real quick. Russell likes to run around the room, so...
So for the document data source APIs, it sounds like it can change the data sources, like the kind of write actions to it or change data sources.
Yep.
What other kinds of write actions can you do?
With the document API?
Yeah.
You want to take that one?
So all it's really doing is modifying the metadata around the data source. So we're not actually editing anything in the data source itself.
Right.
So I want to just make that clear. We're not modifying your data at all. So the main things that it focuses on right now is connections to different data sources or to different servers of a specific data source. So if you're connecting to a SQL server, like a Microsoft SQL server, like you have your I'm going to come to the front so that people don't have to turn around. Sorry.
Come to the front.
Yeah. If you have like your staging SQL server, and then you have your production SQL server, and your staging server has like a lot less data, the document API allows you to modify the server and any of the credentials that you're talking to. Now, caveat that with it needs to be the same data source, so like same number of columns, same type of columns, very similar to the extract thing that I was talking about earlier. And so it allows you to do those kind of things. That's like we have very little modification just because the workbook format is complicated, right? And it requires you to understand all of the semantics that are implicit in the data that's like in the file format that's there. And a lot of that is stuff that is just baked into our C++ code. And so you can't actually reason about it without the C++ code. And so we are very limited in what we want to allow changing just because of that. Because you can very easily corrupt your database or your data source, your TWIB file or your TDS file.
Your data will be fine.
Your workbook. Yeah, your data will be fine. Just to be clear, we never modify your data. But you could potentially lose your workbook if you make modifications to it that aren't in line with the implicit semantics of the thing. So, but you can pull a lot of information. You can get information about the columns. like the types of columns that are there, the names, the aliases. I think we do filters, parameters. So there's a lot of metadata about the data source that you can get, and the object model that is, or the data model that's in the data pane. So those are the things that you can get with the document API. Now some of that will be, where did I put the, oh, you have the microphone. Some of that will be negated because of data catalog. So a lot of the functionality in the document API is also coming to
we're working on some more metadata
data
APIs
cloud.
and things like that that are becoming soon from the data team. So stay tuned for that.
So right now I am the one to actually pass the workbook to production. So is the API doing, right now what I'm doing really carefully editing the XML.
You're one of those people.
Yeah. To change that, so is basically this is what it's doing the API?
Yeah, so the document API, that's what it does, is really just there to, so that you don't have to write all that XML modification stuff. It's to make it a little bit easier for you, so that you can know the things that are safe to change, and then do it in a way that we support.
Workbook files are just XML files. If you haven't cracked them before, you can. But if you start tweaking little things, as Russell said, one small change could easily corrupt your workbook. So we recommend you don't do that. We got a couple minutes left. We can take a couple more questions, and then it's party time. So.
Well, party's not until like 6:45.
That's almost party time.
Yeah.
Iron Viz.
Oh, it's Iron Viz.
Oh yeah,
first, right?
Iron Viz. That's right.
Go to Iron Viz. Iron Viz is awesome. So
Yeah.
I'm sad. I'm gonna miss it, but it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Our use case for the document API was I don't know if it's possible, but we were looking to like put those kind of like tooltip-y type of descriptions in against fields, and because we have dimensions that are like spread across like many different data sources, we wanted to like automate that instead of somebody going in and pasting them. Is that a good use case for document API right now?
So
yeah, I mean, so that's exactly right. The document API, again, you can manipulate some things, but you can get a lot of metadata out of it. We actually had, if you weren't at our hackathon on Monday, which next year everybody should come to it, somebody actually built a data catalog in like a couple hours, and it was really cool. And so he built an entire index of like, hey, here's all the workbooks, here's the fields, here's a whole bunch of information about it. That's the types of things you can do with the data, with the data source API is get.
That's a write operation.
To write it to where?
So to be able to like modify the data source file.
So you can't actually modify the data source itself through the document API. That's what we were saying before. It's read. It's primarily not like there's a couple things you can write, but without having the entire business stack running and managing the entire workbook, we don't have enough. There's a lot of business logic baked into the actual desktop project. It's not just in the file itself. And so the document API is basically a very thin layer over doing the XML editing. What we're looking at in the future is a more complete editor, and that's why we put this up here, is doing a more complete editor and giving you the ability to edit more things. So if that's something you're interested in, that's one of the things we're thinking about for the future is, what if we can allow you to directly via API make modifications to a workbook or data source, even run just on the server, change columns, change things like that.
Yeah, and the benefit of doing it on the server is that we then have that entire implicit like semantic model for your data. And so a lot of the changes that a lot of people want to do with the document API, they can actually do because we understand through the code what everything means and how everything links up. And so like we can actually make those changes safely and in a supported way.
I'm going to run through our closing slides because it's about 4:30, but we're happy to hang out and chat for a few more minutes. Again, if you have questions about docs or want to give some feedback, Mary would love to chat with you. Eric's our authentication guy. He'd love to hear about your authentication stories. I'm Irwin and he's Russell. We'd happily hear about everything else. In terms of some resources you can check out, if you haven't already, all of our track content will be up online and available for you. Our developer program, which we launched this week, sign up for it. It's free. Everybody likes free things. It gets you some free licenses, a free online site to play with. We'll be doing future events online on WebEx, things like that. So please sign up for it. It's a lot of great resources for your usage. And then our GitHub site. A lot of the stuff you've seen today or we've talked about document API, the webhooks, a bunch of, or no, webhooks isn't up there. Our Postman collection for webhooks. So we've got documentation is all up on our GitHub. We love to hear information about it there. Fill out the survey. Again, this is the first time we're trying to do this Chalk Talk thing. We hope to do it more because we like being interactive and not just talking. If you thought the session was great, tell us. If you didn't, ignore it completely. And we'll go from there. But tell them you want to see actual chalkboards next year. So.
Or at least whiteboards.
Or at least whiteboards.
Yeah.
Virtual whiteboards. We'll call it the verse. And of course, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. So I'll leave this up in case anybody wants pictures. And again, we'll hang out for a few minutes and come chat or just go off and enjoy the rest of TC. Thank you for coming.